Hi, this is the Art of Transformation, and I'm Wendy Yellen. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about another in the series about trauma. And the question is, can you heal a trauma you don't remember or you don't remember clearly? And before I go on, please, if you want to be notified of the videos as they come out, and we're making about one a week, then simply like and subscribe and you'll be on the list. Thank you so much. All right. Trauma is a sensitive topic for a lot of people. It's pretty rampant in our society, whether it's an emotional trauma, an accident trauma, ongoing trauma, a discrete one-time trauma. You probably are here because you've experienced one or many. And so you may sense also that there's a trauma in your life, but you may not remember it super clearly, or you don't trust your memory of it. And what I wanted to really assure you of is that whether you remember it clearly or not, there are absolutely ways to work with it that will help you. And I know this can be a real scary piece for people, for some people. The work of really relieving a trauma and getting you back, getting back yourself, doesn't really involve, in the way that Eidetics works with it, doesn't really involve excruciatingly going back and re-experiencing the trauma traumatically as you did the first time. I know, for example, people that have experienced sexual abuse have a real fear about that they'll have to go through it all over again. And also, I'm thinking of one of my clients who had a lot of physical abuse and watched her siblings be abused as well. And it's horrifying to her, and it really freezes her up. And for both these situations, I'm thinking of several clients right now, they were able to really get relief from those horrible experiences without re-experiencing the trauma of it. And also, you're probably concerned about some shame, because often with trauma there is shame. And what I can say is, at least the way that I work with trauma with Eidetics, is the shame isn't really a part of the re-experience or of the resolving the situation. Not because we're in some fantasy about how let's pretend everything didn't happen or was wonderful or gets resolved in this magical way, but more that as you open up, what you discover is not more pain, but more strength. I know that may sound strange, but it's my experience. So today, since today we're really talking about memory and trauma, and I want to tell you a little bit of some of the research about memory. So without going into the hippocampus and the amygdala too much, because that makes my head spin, I want to give you the gist of what I understand. I'm not a brain expert. This is what I understand. So we have different parts of the brain, and when you have a tense experience like a trauma, the amygdala part of your brain gets activated strongly. And what happens because there's stress and there's fear. Now, when the amygdala gets activated strongly because there's a lot of emotion, then the memories are more deeply remembered memory traces in that part of your brain. But it interferes with the hippocampus. And when it interferes with the hippocampus, that's the part of the brain that integrates the trauma. So you have, put simply in my understanding, you have deeper impression in one part of the brain, but a lack of ability to really assimilate, understand, and process the experience. It's part of the reason why sometimes some things happen and somebody says it's just a blur, because the learning in the hippocampus can't happen. It can't happen as easily. It's getting interfered with, including things like specific details. So you may also, there's a thing called implicit memory, where it's not a memory we can think about or talk about or reflect on. It feels impossible to verbalize, and yet it's there. So it's there without conscious recall. That's an implicit memory. And that's often linked to fear symptoms. And also, it's mostly sensory memories like smell and sounds. So when we're working with trauma, there's a lot of fear of pain, which I already alluded to, of recalling a painful time. And many clients in the beginning, they know they need to go there, but they're so afraid to go there, and they're afraid of the effort that it will take, and how they'll have to call on so much of themselves to get through it again. And what I really want you to hear is that you can truly work through the trauma without re-traumatizing yourself. So important to know. Also, when we work with trauma with Eidetics, it doesn't require perfect recall, which would be ridiculous since there is really no such thing. I'm going to give you a little bit of research from Elizabeth Loftus, who wrote that, I love this, a memory is not a recording. And all memories can be influenced even after they're created, like infamously eyewitness testimonies. There was an experiment called Lost in the Mall where the experimenters literally were able to paste on to a person's childhood memories an experience of being lost in the mall. And 1/4 to 1/3 of the participants actually accepted and experienced this lost in the mall memory as real. I think that's just amazing. So we're not photographing our memories. We're discarding 99%, I believe it is, of what we take in when we're creating memories. And so you know, I'm sure you've experienced, maybe you've talked to a sibling about something that happened when you were both children and they remember it totally differently. So what's real here? Now, gaps in your memory of a trauma can create symptoms, physical and emotional. For example, let's say a young rape victim who had always walked down a particular path to get to work or to get to school, and then one day gets raped on that path and blames herself for walking down that path, because clearly had she not walked down the path, that guy wouldn't have raped her. But in fact, the thought or the understanding that this had been safe for years just kind of disappears because the sense of blame and shame can be so strong. There's another thing that creates symptoms in our present life from a trauma that happened before, and that is lack of ability to act. And those lacks of ability create symptoms often in our body. So let's say in the experience itself, maybe it wasn't possible to run or fight or put up a struggle or confront the person. It just wasn't possible, whether socially because they were an authority over you or bigger than you, or you were just way too young or taken way off guard. But what happens is that the threat from someone there, and there is in the person at the time an impetus to act. There was in you an impetus to act, or a desire to act, or a wish that you could act, even if it was layered over by, but I can't because of who this person is, or because of how little I am, or whatever. So those are healing movements that get kind of trapped in the body, movements and actions. They get sealed into the muscles and also into our sense of self, who we are and what we're actually capable of, and how we can protect ourselves. And that results in body tension and fears in the present. They get carried over. So we may not be necessarily remembering the trauma wholly, completely, but in Eidetics, those locked up potentials that didn't get expressed, and a resolution and actions that are still in the body and in the spirit and in the muscles, those potentials actually get unlocked, so that you feel inside you the ability that got repressed, the strength that got repressed, the strength of will that got repressed or couldn't happen. And what happens with that is a deep sense of freedom and spaciousness and confidence just comes naturally from that. Not pretending that you could have done differently, not imagining what you wish you had done. That's very, very different. It's actually a visceral experience of having it now. It's like the difference between having a visualization of being on a beach and imagining that your toes were in the warm sand and the waves are lapping up against your feet or your body, and actually truly experiencing it. Truly, truly experiencing it. That's the difference. I hope that makes sense. You may also think that you remember the whole incident, but it's very likely that there are gaps and parts that have been forgotten, and those tend to create symptoms. Because, as I said earlier, memories are distorted and easily distorted, particularly with traumatic events. And here's the pattern that it follows. People tend to remember more trauma than they experienced, which is called memory amplification. Not that it's a fake memory. The memory amplifies the trauma, and memory amplification carries real consequences in your present. The more memory amplification that a person experiences, the more likely they have symptoms, PTSD, intrusive thoughts, intrusive images. So it's very real. I'm not saying that you're making it up at all. This is how memory works, and how it can become worse in the mind, so to speak, worse even than it was at the time. So, for example, I'm thinking about a client of mine, the client I mentioned earlier, who was physically abused and watched her siblings be physically abused, and has very hard for her to fall asleep. She doesn't feel safe. Those times of abuse, which I've seen in eidetic images with her, were horrific. And they're affecting her intensely right now. And with all of that, no matter how, and with all the reluctance to even look at the image of them, what she finds is that the relief that she's been getting, and the relaxation in her muscles, and the sense of safety has changed. So no matter whether your memory is amplified or not, you're still able to reach a place of real inner peace and much more. Another way that a memory and trauma can affect us is, this one is a little bit not lighthearted, but less intense, but not less intense for the person who experienced it. So one of my clients, we'll call him Bob, he was hiking and he got terribly lost. And this is an activity he loves. And it was pretty dangerous, getting dark and so forth. He made it through fine, but his memory of the incident and what he took away from it was, maybe he's not as good a hiker as he thought he was. And maybe just maybe he needs to be a lot more careful, and maybe this isn't for him anymore. I mean, some of those thoughts were intruding, but it was really shaking his confidence, and he's been hiking forever and loves it. As we went over piece by piece what happened, he was able to take in how some of his decisions, several decisions, were reckless, and that he had a sense that there was a better way to handle it, but he ignored that sense and went with the reckless side of him. And it was very helpful for him to viscerally know this in his mind and his body. It wasn't just a thought. It wasn't an idea from me. He got it. That, in fact, he had this other side of him, a safer, confident, good, safe hiker, but he was ignoring it. And so he got a better sense of how to pay attention to both his tendency to be reckless and his clarity about how to be a hiker. And that was very freeing for him, because he was a little bit going down the road of, I wonder if I should be doing this. He's also getting older, so, he was being thoughtful about it. There's one more kind of memory I want to talk about with you, and that's what I call the iconic memory. So this is the memory, it's painful, and you've probably told a couple people about it more than once, or you probably retold it more than once. And if you haven't retold it, if you're more of a private person, it's come to your mind several times, probably many times. I call this an iconic memory because it just stands out as one of the major memories of your childhood. So I have one like that, where it was with my mother, and it's a very long story, so I won't go totally into it, but it was very negative memory of my mother being what I thought quite mean to me, and criticizing me as a young child for something that I really had needed guidance from her. She would have been a great person to give me input. I didn't have it. I did the best I could, but I was really too young to be able to carry off this particular activity well without help. And it affected me for decades. And it was such a big iconic memory for me, but I was really surprised, because when my mother was close to dying, she actually brought this up, which we'd never talked about it. And she told me she was sorry. And this was one of the very few things she ever said she was sorry about. So clearly it had a lot of meaning for her too. And she really remembered it too. So memory in me often affected how I felt about my own competence and my confidence and my less than great idea of how I could do something, which in fact I could do very well, but I had a distorted view of my abilities. So whether you have a traumatic memory like that, which I imagine you do, we all have them, or a very difficult one that involves abuse or neglect or an accident or any other trauma, or whether you remember it clearly or not, is way less important. then your willingness to engage with yourself and your willingness to allow the buried parts of you, like for me, the confidence and the competence, to reemerge. The parts that got buried or covered over by the trauma, and the parts that aren't showing up to the degree that you wish they would in your present adult life. That's the willingness that it takes. So I'm going to give you a suggestion for an action you can take. If you're willing, if you're willing, pick one traumatic moment that you have experienced and ask yourself, have you ever had any inkling that maybe there's more to it, more depth, more complexity, more resources than you consciously remember? Any inkling? Maybe you just had a whiff. Like in my memory, I had a whiff in my memory that my mother didn't really know how to handle me. I knew that, and that her own perfectionistic tendencies were making her feel guilty that she hadn't helped me, and therefore the way she was dealing with it was she was blaming me, so she was feeling guilty for her part in it. Or maybe your sister or brother remembers it differently. Maybe just a whiff that maybe there's more to it. It would be helpful to you as a beginning here, really helpful to take in that there just may be more to this incident than you're currently remembering. Now, I'm not undermining that it happened or that it felt terrible. I'm giving you a hand to possibly experience that it's more complicated or complex than maybe it seemed to you at 5 or 8. And that complexity can be an opening for you. Just a whiff. All right, give it a try. See what happens. And I'll see you on the next recording. Bye for now.